1. Blog Talk Radio.
You're about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we are pleased to have Ms. Jessica Jackson Sloan as our guest. Ms. Sloan is the human rights attorney who began her career representing California death row inmates in their appeals. She now oversees the Twitter Cut 50 initiative to end mass incarceration. Jessica currently sits on the Committee for a Fair Judiciary, serves as the board member of the American Constitution Society Bay Area chapter, represents Congressman Jared Huffman on the Democratic Central Committee of Marlin, and serves on the Public Outreach Committee for the Marlin Bar Association. She was elected to the Mill Valley City Council in November 2013, becoming the youngest ever elected official in Marlin County. My pleasure to introduce to you Jessica Jackson Sloan. Jessica, thank you very much for being on our program. Represents Congressman Jared.
Hi, thank
Hello.
you so much.
We just had some feedback. What's our problem here? Yeah, something just had. Jessica, just hold on one second.
Well, you guys keep talking.
Oh, we're okay?
Well, I don't know what is going on, but I will.
Becoming the youngest ever elected official. It's playing me again.
I know, and I can't figure it out.
We've never had that happen before, Jessica, but every time something happens, it's never happened before.
I don't even know. But anyway, keep
Okay. All right. Jessica, thank you so much for being on our program. We'll keep on chugging along. Jessica, I am particularly interested in this subject because for years I have been complaining about the number of incarcerations and the incarcerating people as the remedy to our crime problem, to social unrest, to social disobedience and whatever. And it seems like that approach is very archaic, literally barbaric. And I understand today that the United States, percentage-wise, has the largest incarceration rate in the entire world. And of course, we consider ourselves the most free country in the world. Well, it's pretty tough to be free when you're behind bars. Am I over-exaggerating or this situation as the remedy?
No, I don't think that you are over-exaggerating the situation. We have gone beyond the tipping point where the United States now has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's incarcerated population. Some of the statistics we see are as much as 1 in every 9 African Americans being behind bars. The situation is so grave that 1 out of every 3 children will grow up in African American community with the parent behind bars. So it's not only affecting those who are actually incarcerated in their own liberty, but the folks, the family members and the children of the people who are incarcerated as well.
Yeah. Tell us, how did you decide to narrow down your practice to focus in this area?
Well, it's pretty interesting. I grew up here in Marin County, where I'm now on the council, as you said, in the city of Mill Valley. I was really interested in environmental work, and I took a job working for the Clean Air, Clean Water campaign down in Georgia after high school. While I was there, I fell in love, met my former husband. We got married, and unfortunately, he developed a drug addiction. Instead of getting treatment for that drug addiction, he was incarcerated. So I remember being 23, and I'd actually just had our young daughter 2 months before, and we show up to the courtroom, and we had a public defender, though at the time it was just a conflict public defender, somebody who actually practiced a different area of law but had taken on a criminal case. He had a whole lot of other cases and had not reviewed the file or paid much attention to any of the evidence in the file, or the fact that my husband had never been incarcerated or had any record before at that point. We were advised to take a plea deal that resulted in him serving 3.5 years of a 6-year sentence in prison. This meant losing our home, our family being broken up, which resulted in our divorce, and my daughter growing up without her father for the first 3.5 years. Obviously, you don't come away from an experience like that the same.
Yes.
And for me, that meant finding my life's passion, which is ending mass incarceration. There were so many
Jessica, I want to just, excuse me, I hate to interrupt. It's a fascinating story. We are having a technical problem. I want to make sure we fix it so we don't have it throughout the entire broadcast. Did you fix that yet, Preston?
No, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang up on her and call her back and see if that helps.
Jessica, we're going to disconnect on Skype, and then we're going to call you back to see if that corrects the situation, because we're getting a repeated dialogue echo in the background, which is lagging behind your speaking. And so I'm afraid that we may lose our audience. So if you can just hold on just for about 30 seconds, we'll disconnect and we'll reconnect. Okay, please.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll talk.
Okay, folks, we have Jessica Jackson Sloan. She's a human rights attorney. She began her career representing death row inmates in their appeals. And this is something that very little attention is being given to. In fact, if you listen to all of the debates, whether it be the Democrat debates or the Republican debates for president, very little attention is spent discussing this subject. What really bothers me is that we will spend hours upon hours talking about ISIS when we should be talking about the very people that we've imprisoned here in the United States unjustifiably, and even those people who have committed crimes or disobeyed the masters in government, because they're the ones that create the laws, and many of the laws are unjustifiable in and of themselves. They wind up serving prison sentences and breaking up families. That, to me, is a lot more real and something that is of our concern, a lot more than what is happening in Syria, in Montenegro, in Yemen, and other countries. We should get out of those countries, bring everyone home, and just clean up our own mess and make sure we have a free country again. Now, do we have Jessica back on? All right, we have her back on again.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes, no background noise. This is great. Oh, we're miracle workers. Okay, John, I'm sorry. So if you'll just continue where you left off, I'd appreciate it.
Great. So I was saying, my own personal experience in having a loved one incarcerated and seeing the way it devastated his relationship with our daughter, how it broke our marriage, how it really impacted his life, his ability to find employment, housing, and how it actually did not deal with the situation, which was a drug addiction, how it actually made it more difficult for him to not only overcome the drug addiction, which is a feat in itself, but also to really move on with his life and contribute to society.
Yeah. May I ask, this is a personal question, was he consuming the drugs or was he dealing in drugs? May I ask?
He was consuming the drugs.
He was consuming the drugs. So actually he was of no harm to anyone. He was just doing what he wants to do. He was taking a drug that our leaders feel that no one should have ingested anyway. So the remedy to that is to put the person in jail for 3 years, ruin their lives, and then when they come out, about the only job you can get is probably being a drug dealer. I mean, I'm being facetious in a way, but that doesn't seem to make any sense. Did incarcerating him really solve any problems at all?
No, it did not. Like I said, incarceration breaks families and it reduces your opportunities to move forward. I am constantly surprised at what some of the collateral consequences people face are. Not just the actual incarceration and the trauma that occurs behind those walls. We've got people who go to prison and come home with PTSD because they've had to fight for survival in the overcrowded conditions, people whose mental health is compromised, their physical health is compromised while being incarcerated. So you've got that. You've got the effects on the family as well, losing your home, not having that second income. A lot of marriages obviously disrupted, relationships with children. So losing the support network is a huge collateral consequence. Not having people to help you when you're coming home. Then of course, finding employment. It's already hard to find a job in this economy, let alone if you have a big scarlet F on your jacket,
Right.
So being able to find a job, which opens up a host of issues. There are training programs within prisons that'll teach you how to be a firefighter or teach you how to cut hair. But when you come out, you might not be able to get a license to practice that job you've been trained for.
Right. Many cities, municipalities have you fill an application, or you have to go to a school to become certified. And in many cases, if you have a record, they don't recognize you. They won't allow you to graduate, and they won't certify you. So it's a catch as catch can. You lose both ways. While
Exactly.
During his trial, was rehabilitation brought up as an alternative? I assume he had not been arrested before. Am I correct?
You are correct.
And so, but he wasn't given even one chance, saying, well, we're going to put you through a rehabilitation program. If you clean up your act, we'll just let the sleeping dogs lie and let you get on with your life and live with your family. Was that an option at all?
No, we were never offered any option of treatment. The entire system was just not set up to actually benefit the person who had committed a crime. Nobody asked, hey, why did you do that? Why are you on drugs? Why are you using? Have you sought help? Has your family tried to get you help? There were no questions like that. Nobody asked, how can we keep you in a position where when you re-enter, you're going to be as strong as possible to continue in your job, continue as a productive citizen, or continue as a member of your family. It was a very cold process. It was very scary, very confusing. As his wife, this is prior to having even my college degree. I went to college and law school after this.
Oh, that's was going to be my next question. So, what was he? Did he have a court-appointed attorney?
Yes, he had a court-appointed attorney who had some prosecution experience, but otherwise worked primarily in contract law. He took some criminal cases on the side to make money. I've seen in some courts, they'll assign you a case if you'd like to pick up a case for $1,000. And it doesn't matter how much work you get on that case or you do on that case. You end up just getting that flat fee of $1,000, which actually ends up encouraging them to do a worse job because you want to get as many cases as you can, which means doing as little work as you can and not bringing in the appropriate resources like investigators or experts who might be able to shed some light on what's really going on to the court and help you get a reduced sentence.
Yeah. Well, here's my philosophical problem. You mentioned that he performed a criminal act. He didn't perform a criminal act. Who's a crime? What kind of crime was it? He just broke a unjust law as far as I'm concerned. And in fact, he was abiding by the Constitution. He was doing whatever he wants to do, provided he was not inflicting any undue burden on anyone else. What he was doing was absolutely constitutional. No one was harmed in the action. It's just that he just disobeyed a law that really doesn't make much sense when you really look at it from a humanistic point of view. So no real crime was committed. Yes, he disobeyed an edict by our illustrious figureheads, but that's about it. So I beg to differ that he broke any laws, or he performed a criminal act.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here.
Well, I just, we have laws on everything. We've been arresting 5-year-old little kids for selling lemonade on their driveway. Something we all did when we were young and never bothered. Now you have to go and you have to appeal to a jury to get your 5-year-old kid out of some sort of internment camp or something. I mean, we've become such a what's the word? Litigious.
What legit? What are you trying to say?
Litigious.
Thank you very much, society. My tongue got all screwed up. That it seems that it's either you walk that straight line and you watch everything, you watch all your P's and Q's, or you get locked up. It almost seems like the government likes this because this keeps people under wraps, under control. No, everyone is afraid to do everything. I'm sure one of these days, someone's going to barge in and close down the station because we said something that the government didn't like, and I fully expect that to happen in the near future. And that'll happen to many stations. But we keep on going, and I just hope I escape fast enough, so they don't get me. But it seems that our court system and the laws, not the court system, but the courts, the laws that we enact are more to control human behavior and not to protect the citizens at large.
I would agree. And let's also talk about the fact that there are actually incentives, very real financial incentives for the system to continue to work the way that it is, or not work the way that it is a better way of putting it. We know now that in our country, incarceration costs us $80 billion a year. Now that's a huge financial industry, and that's everybody from the folks that are operating the phones getting paid. There was just that huge lawsuit and the FCC got involved when my former husband was incarcerated. Even when we lived in the same state, he would call home for 15 minutes, and that 15-minute phone call cost us $21. So they were, I know, it's shocking.
It makes no sense.
Allegedly for monitoring the line and connecting, but it really did make no sense, and it was them making an incredible profit off the backs of the families of those who were incarcerated. And one of those consequences is that in doing so, they were tearing families apart. I couldn't afford $21 more than once a week, and even that was a stretch on a one income, especially while I was in college. So it's a huge industry with a lot of pockets being lined, and you don't see any financial incentives for moving people out of the system and keeping them out. So in some ways, wardens don't have any incentives to actually make sure that people who go there for rehabilitation are rehabilitated before they come out and given a chance to succeed on the outside.
Yeah, people don't want to work themselves out of a job. They'll do everything to perpetuate the job. And I guess an example of that would be private prisons. They get paid by the number of cells that are being occupied. So their incentive is a lot of crime. We want crime. We want to have a lot of people. In fact, we not only want to fill up this jail, but we want to stuff it up to a point where we have to build another one and make twice as much money. There's only an incentive to do everything in the opposite direction in which that we intend.
Exactly. We do see that with private prisons. We also know that, the prison guards unions are very powerful, especially here in California. In terms of lobbying, and of course it's in their best interest to have as many jobs as possible and job security. So even down to the level of the folks that are interacting with the people who are incarcerated, they have an incentive for the system not to work.
Yeah. What bothers me, if I extrapolate this all the way out, it seems that there seems more and more jobs are being created, but not in the private sector, but indirectly or directly in the public sector. Whether it be in the prisons, whether it be in the armed forces, whether it be in the military-industrial complex. This is where all the money's going. This is where all the high-paying jobs are. And then the average American is struggling just to get by, working in the in the private sector, and they're struggling, and yet we're getting close to $19 trillion in current year's debt, and no one seems to care. I don't know where we're going, and I know this is not your bailiwick, but it just seems to me everything that you're fighting for, you're fighting against a tremendous wave. And I hope you're strong enough to withstand the current of what is going on right now.
Well, I got to say to that point, Cut 50, we were founded a year ago by Van Jones and Matt Haney and myself. And part of our strength has to come from the fact that all of us have been directly impacted by the system. We're not just fighting for some theoretical issue. It's something that we've lived and breathed and seen. We've got an entire program within Cut 50, the Voices of Cut 50, that is dedicated to not just uplifting the stories of people who have been incarcerated, but also to giving them leadership in the issue and having them fight at the forefront of this issue. Because you're right, it takes a lot of strength, and the people who have that strength are the people who have been oppressed by this system.
Yeah. Well, tell us, how is Cut 50 doing? How is your program coming along? What approach are you taking, and what type of progress have you made, and do you anticipate making?
Well, I'll start where we began last January. It really actually even started a little before then. I met Van Jones, and I already knew Matt Haney, who's on the school board here in San Francisco. And the three of us sat down and we talked. Like I said in the introduction, I was representing death row inmates in their appeals here in California at the time. Matt was the executive director of the UC Student Association, and Van Jones is, well, Van Jones, and he's on television. And at the time, he was actually on a show with Newt Gingrich called Crossfire. So the entire premise of this show, Crossfire, is just Van Jones and Essie Cupp and Stephanie Cutter and Newt Gingrich don't agree on anything. So they would put Van and they would put Newt, and they would have them just go at it on every topic. So Van's sitting there, and he's, in between the shows, it came up that he and I were talking about working on criminal justice reform. And Van had worked on criminal justice reform in the juvenile sector a decade before, and then gone on to the green jobs and, to work for the president, and then came back out and was looking to get involved again. When Van brought up the issue of criminal justice reform with Newt Gingrich, whom he had yet to agree on anything with, he suddenly looked up and realized that the former speaker was nodding along with him.
Oh.
And Van was shocked. He said, "This is the one area we agree on?" So, we ended up meeting with Gingrich Productions team, with both the former speaker and his staff, his wonderful staff, and we really hit it off, which is something I probably never thought I would say coming from San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah.
In my but we decided that we were going to host a convening, because if Van and Newt could get along on this issue, we suspected there were other people from both parties that could, and from non-parties, that could also agree with us on this issue. And we kind of wanted to start building a coalition. So 2015, the idea of 2015 was to build unlikely partnerships, and also to begin to raise this issue in the media, because prior to this last year, the only time you heard about criminal justice in the media was in the wake of, a mass trauma or terror in society, or if somebody had committed a crime that was getting a lot of news. We didn't have a whole lot of conversation about the fact that the system itself was broken and perpetuating the cycle of violence and making our cities less safe. So we sat down and we decided we were going to have this convening at GW, and we might have 100 people come and attend. We thought it would be about 4 hours. We could have 10 speakers or so. What ends up happening over a very short period of time, we had a briefing in Congress just to kind of test the waters. We had Newt Gingrich and Van Jones and Senator Cory Booker and Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and Vikrant Reddy from Right on Crime. And you would not believe it, Joe. This room was like Beatlemania. It was full of staffers and Congress members. Everybody really cared about the issue. It was refreshing in DC to have an issue where people on both sides of the aisle were saying the same thing and asking for change. So this inspired us to build out our little summit a bit. What we ended up having was over 800 attendees, 84 speakers, 10 of which were Congress members from both sides, 3 GOP governors, then Attorney General Eric Holder, Secretary of Labor Tom Perez, and the day before we're about to embark on this huge summit, the White House calls and says the president would like to send you a video message as well so he can participate. So that really showed us what the appetite was for working in this issue.
Well, with all of that support, especially bipartisan support, why hasn't things changed more quickly? Why haven't we seen a revolution in this, especially when some states now are legalizing marijuana, and of course you have people incarcerated for possession of marijuana, and in the states in which it's now legal, and they're serving time. I mean, this whole cacophony of thing is just incredibly maligned, where it none of it makes any sense, and there's no start and no ending point at all. Is there any legislation now that is being brought forward to end this madness?
Oh yes. So we're really excited to be promoting the Safe Justice Act. It's a bill that was introduced right after our summit by Representative Bobby Scott and Representative Jim Sensenbrenner. We also saw 3 other bills announced at our summit. We've got a bill in the Senate right now that's got a lot of support, including support I hear from the White House as well. And it's a bipartisan bill. And we've got a second bill that's more of an omnibus bill introduced by Representative Goodlatte in the House as well. So the change has not come to fruition yet, but if you look how much this landscape has changed very, very quickly in the last year to support the introduction of this legislation, it's happening. And we're seeing a lot of legislators stepping forward on the issue. Another landmark, I think, is we went from having a hard time getting so much as a state representative to speak out on the issue a year ago. And now we've got folks campaigning for President of the United States on this issue. So that's huge, and it's changing the conversation.
I really wish I would hear more of it, though. I mean, it's become a...
You and me both.
It's almost a soundbite. They'll spend 3 hours talking about ISIS, and they don't even know who that is, but they won't spend 5 minutes, on an issue such as this that affects us directly, and to me is all unconstitutional to start off with. Now, are you categorizing drugs, the possession of illegal drugs, by category, or like marijuana versus this versus that? Or are you saying we're going to treat every drug user the same, other than if they committed a crime, obviously? But is it all inclusive, I guess, is the question.
I think when I look at crime, I want to see a changed approach to all crimes, not just one class of drugs, not just nonviolent crimes. I'd like to see a changed approach to all crimes, because there are programs that you can do, whether it's restorative justice or alternative sentencing or bringing in drug courts and mental health courts and veterans courts, and treating crime for the underlying problem as opposed to the one act, in order to reduce the chance that it's ever going to occur again.
Yeah. Well, they say, people who commit crime are committing a crime against society, so to speak. But then when we incarcerate them, society is paying for that crime. more so than the person who's being incarcerated. So society loses twice when we incarcerate someone, and so it doesn't make any sense. We're about half past the hour right now. Jessica, could you hold on just for about 60 seconds as we break for station identification, and we will be right back?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Folks, stay with us. I'm going to give you our call-in number. It's 646-652-4620. That's 646-652-4620. When you call, and I know we have people on the line now, but if you want to ask a question or make a comment, please press 1 so we know how to select your number, okay? But just hold on. Don't go away. We'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective, not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more.
Steve Harden of the Harden Insurance Agency has over 30 years of experience designing family insurance protection, including retirement planning. Call 918-488-0024 or go to hardenagency.com and request a free in-depth estate and retirement evaluation. We look forward to earning your trust and helping you meet your life goals.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, this is Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano. With us, we have Jessica Jackson Sloan. She's a civil human rights attorney and representing California death row inmates in their appeals. And we want you to call with your questions or comments, 646-652-4620, and press the 1 button so we know that you're the telephone, because we have people on the line now. We have 30 incoming lines, and we will pick out those people who want to ask a question. If you press the 1 button, we'll know that. By the way, Jessica, Preston made a good point, and I asked him to come online and get on the video and make that comment. He didn't want to do that, but I forced him to do that. Here he is. Okay.
All right. Well, so I'm listening. I'll press the right button at some point. Okay. So anyway, just listening to this, my comment is, this is the American justice system, and based on conversations we've had on this show before, and certainly the conversation we're having with you, where's the justice in this? If a court appointed attorney his incentive is to get as many cases as possible to make $1,000 a case, he doesn't care about his client. He cares about getting him through the system so he can make another $1,000. So, like in your case, your ex-husband he didn't get justice to me. And so anyway, my whole thing that I was talking to Joe on the break was, they call this the justice system, and it seems like, as in many cases, unless you have a lot of money where you can throw money at things, there's no justice in it at all.
And I think there's about 2.2 million men and women behind bars thinking that same thought right now. So, and their families as well. I do want to point out there are public defenders out there, of course, that are at offices, state-run offices and county-run offices that do care a lot about this issue and their clients and are not there for the money. It was just in our case that we had a conflict panel attorney who was not known for really caring about their clients, and clearly did not in our case. But there are a lot of situations where that occurs as well. So you're right to point to that. The system is certainly not one that's just.
Yeah. Well, now that you've had a conversation, with our legislature, what do you expect really will happen? I mean, this should be a slam dunk. It should happen right away. It should be changed. I mean, and if in fact it does, which I always have my doubts when it comes to Congress and what they do and our legislators, what do you think will come out of you're presenting and bringing this issue to the fore? What do you think will happen now?
So, it's good that you ask that. Starting on the federal level itself is interesting because, like I said, there's 2.2 million people who are incarcerated across this country. Of that, only about 200,000 of them are actually incarcerated by our federal government. So for us, trying to bring change on the federal level has really been symbolic. We'd like to see our federal legislatures pass massive reforms that treat criminal justice completely differently, but that send a very strong message to the states. Hey, it's time to wake up. You're over there, state governor, trying to balance your budget. You're having problems doing so. What's one of the top 5 expenses in your state budget is going to be your corrections system. You're throwing money into that. It's a failed system, and you're hurting families and making our streets more dangerous in the process, as well as taking away people's liberty. So our hope is that we'll have a federal bill passed, and that will inspire the state legislatures to go ahead and bring more reform, similar to what we saw here in California with Proposition 47. Would like to see that happening in all the states.
Well, it seems that the states would be incentivized to not to incarcerate people because it's their people in their state. They could be taxpayers and voters and whatever, and at the same time, it reduces the cost of the state. There must be a hellacious amount of internal corruption within the system to keep this going, because there should be no incentive to incarcerate anyone unless the guy is a mass murderer or he's done explicit harm to people, and he's got to be put away because he's dangerous to society. But I'll bet if we take that category, the people who are truly dangerous to society, and put them aside, I'll bet they don't represent 20% of the people that are incarcerated. And I have no idea what the number is, but I'm just guessing.
The penal system is supposed to serve several different purposes. It's supposed to incapacitate. So like you're saying, if somebody's too dangerous to be on the streets, incapacitating them so they can't commit another crime. It's supposed to rehabilitate, which is a joke in today's penal system. Nobody's being rehabilitated. In fact, we do see an escalation in the kind of crimes that are being committed as people are exposed more and more to the criminal justice system and incarcerated. And then it's supposed to be, punitive, but it's not worth making our streets less safe and hurting us just to punish people. And that's really the system that we've ended up with, is one that's purely focused on retribution and punishment at this point.
Okay. Well, so I guess I find this incredibly frustrating because I can't seem to wrap my pea brain around it. I guess what you're saying is that the federal government has the minor number in numbers, the minor number of people, lesser number of people incarcerated, but they will try to set an example for the states. Assuming that is not totally successful, are you then going to start campaigning or proceeding with activist committees in each state individually, or how will that go about? How will that play out?
So, I think there's another party in this conversation that we haven't talked about yet, and that's the American people. This isn't just driven by the government. There has been, for decades now, a social perception that anybody who commits a crime And normally you don't have to say what kind of crime. Anybody who commits a crime deserves to be punished, deserves to be locked up, deserves to be incarcerated, and cannot live in society. People, when they close their eyes and picture a criminal, it's a very scary image. And it's not always an accurate one. In fact, I would venture a guess it's not an accurate one. So part of what Cut 50 is really focused on for this next year is we've declared a year of empathy. And what that means is lifting up the stories of the people who are incarcerated. Like you said, this doesn't make sense. A lot of the people who are going to prison, once you hear their story and you understand what happened, the last thing you would ever want to do is send them to prison. You want to get them help. You want to build their lives and give them the skills and the training and the resources where they can contribute to society as well. Because most people don't want to do badly, right? They want to function within society. They want to be productive and have families and homes and cars and hold down a job. So what we're embarking upon now to make space for legislatures to actually bring change is to really win over the hearts and minds of the American people by telling these stories and increasing the empathy for people who have been exposed to the system and directly impacted by it.
All right, do we have a caller?
We do have a caller with a question.
Okay, we have what line?
Line 2.
All right, caller, line 2. Caller, you're on the air. Your first name, please.
This is Jabbar. How you all doing?
Fine, thank you.
Good. I've been listening to the conversation, and I've had some experience in the court system here, not as a criminal, but more so with traffic issues. And I can tell you this for sure. The problem is, from my experience, has to do with the prosecutors and the magistrates and the judges. I think the only way that you're going to clean up this system, legal system, if you want to call it, is to start suing those who are in control of it for either administrative procedure violations or violating someone's civil and human rights by ignoring the very laws and rules that are in place to protect the people's rights. Having meetings and discussions, that's not going to do anything. The only thing to do is to sue those who are violating procedures and who are ignoring the applicable laws. And that starts with the prosecutors and, of course, the attorneys, the magistrates, and even the judges. I've witnessed federal judges violate civil and criminal rules of procedure. So that's what the issue is. You got to sue them. Anything short of that is nothing but gibberish.
That's an excellent point. I mean, why don't we incarcerate the prosecutors that for doing a poor job or doing an incorrect job or being unprepared or doing this just to make as much money as possible? Why don't we turn the tables on it, and then maybe if we put all the prosecutors in jail, we wouldn't have that many inmates. Jessica, what do you think of that? I think this was basically where he was eventually going.
You know, there are cases that I definitely agree with you on that. I do know of one case where a prosecutor who manufactured evidence was incarcerated, but there is a concept in the legal world, and I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, of qualified immunity that protects people who are in those positions from lawsuits, and it's been construed by the courts to very, very broadly to really protect any action they're taking while in the course of their office.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine if someone has enough money, they can almost get away with anything. Look at our elected officials when they are caught doing some egregious acts. These lawsuits and depositions go on forever, and eventually it just sort of dissolves somehow in the smut of bureaucratic red tape, and as a result, you never hear anything again. But if it was just Joe Blow, who was dead broke and had the guy would be serving a long sentence within a week or two. So it seems that if you have enough money, you can get away with just about anything. And by the way, our elected officials get away with crimes that are a lot more egregious on a daily basis than the people serving time right now for what they've done.
We definitely see that people in a lower socioeconomic class are disproportionately affected all the way from the beginning, whether it's police profiling and police practices, increased number of police on patrol in certain neighborhoods that are of lower socioeconomic status, all the way through, their defense being with public defenders or not having resources brought in that they need, being denied the resources by the court for investigators or experts. And then, of course, not being granted release on recognizance once they have been detained initially and waiting for trial. That's a very disruptive period in people's lives that yes. I don't think a lot of folks take into consideration that once you've been arrested, if you can't make bail, you're going to sit there.
Right.
And I don't know about you, since you are the boss, but my boss would not be okay with me calling in and saying, hey, I got arrested. I supposedly committed a crime. I didn't do it, but I'm going to have to sit here for the next 2 or 3 weeks till I can get a court date. So even if you didn't commit the crime and are never found guilty, but you're detained because you can't afford your bail, you can lose your job, lose your housing, and have a very difficult time, of course, getting back on track.
I don't want to get political because I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat in any way, shape, or form. But if you look at the Hillary Clinton and the hullabaloo about the emails that she sent on a server, and it may have sacrificed U.S. security and all that. If that was a regular Joe Blow, Mr. Citizen, or a low-level person, that person would be locked up for 10 lifetimes. I mean, with hardly a trial. And yet she's running for president of the United States. And I'm not picking on her as a Democrat or anything like that. I'm just giving her as an example because it's just a very well-known example. And I think that's what she has done, I'm sure, is a lot worse, or she purportedly had done, seems to be a lot worse than these picayune minimal crimes or misdemeanors, and in fact they're not really crimes. We just disobeyed a law. We disobeyed a law, but there was no crime committed and no one harmed. And yet those people go to jail, and yet she's running for the president of the United States, and she may become president of the United States. To me, that just shorts every circuit in my brain, whatever's left of it, by the way.
I think that we do see the disproportionate effects, not just with socioeconomic class, but with power as well. Of course, if you know the right people, you're probably able to have a much more likely shot at this concept of justice. If you have a lawyer in the family, if you've got the resources to buy one, if you've, got the resources to complete some sort of drug or alcohol course ahead of time, and show the judge that you've done that, you might get some leniency. I'll tell you the craziest socioeconomic example that I've just started learning about with fines and fees. So once you're no longer physically incarcerated, a lot of the time you still have a financial incarceration in terms of a restitution to society.
Right.
And I just wrote an op-ed with Van Jones that was on CNN.com about this issue, just very cursory, and we're going to be doing an entire series on fines and fees to point out kind of the senselessness of some of this. But there are states in our country that, 22 of them, that will not let you vote till you have paid off your fines and fees. So there, if you have money, you can pay off your fines and fees, and you can vote in the next election.
Right.
If you have not paid off your fines and fees and you cannot pay off your fines and fees, you might show up to court and the judge will say, hey, you've served your time, but you're not able to make your probation payments, some of which, by the way, are exponentially increased by private probation companies adding in their own fees for even holding on to your probation fee and administering that probation fee. But the judge might tell you, if you can't pay your fines and fees, you can go sit it out in jail instead. So they have what they call stay to pay, which the point of restitution is that you're restoring society by paying to them.
Right.
So now instead, not only are you not paying back that money that might go to cover some of the administrative costs for your incarceration or your court or whatnot, which, you know, it's not fair to even impose upon an individual coming out of incarceration to begin with. But not only are you not paying that restitution, now taxpayers are paying for you to sit in jail while your life is further disrupted.
Right. What alternative are you offering? You're saying, okay, what we're doing is not right, and I agree. If a person broke a law but didn't harm anyone, and for some reason there should be some sort of restitution, allowing that person to go back on the job and pay $10 a week for the next 10 years or something, whatever the case may be, that seems to be logical to me. What are you suggesting as an alternative to the current system? So for example, Europe does not have the system that we have, and they have very few people incarcerated.
No, and you know what else is very interesting? I'll take Norway for an example. I know that they just got the #1 place to live in the world for the 12th year in a row. But I'll take a Norwegian prison for an example. So here in America, if you commit a petty theft crime, you're incarcerated and you come out, there's a 74% chance that you're going to end up going back to prison.
Right.
74% chance.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Right? Where do you see that kind of failure? Where would you continue to invest in a system where there was a 74% chance that you were going to fail? It's probably as bad as a gambling addiction.
Oh, yeah.
But in Norway, for the same class of petty theft crimes and people being incarcerated, or going through the criminal justice system, I should say, there is a 14% chance of them committing that same crime or being caught for committing that same crime again. So, you know, are Europeans just smarter than we are? I don't think so. I'm half Swedish, so I might be a little biased, but I don't think so. I think it's just evidence that our system is broken. And when you say, what would I do differently? I would treat people as people. I would not treat them as an animal that you shove in a cage and you lock up and you take away their resources. And when they come out, you deprive them of any meaningful opportunities to redeem themselves and re-enter society successsely.
Yeah. Well, when you speak with people, legislators, do you ever bring up the contrast between Europe and the United States, of us being, you know, home of the land of the, home of the brave, land of the free, and all this other stuff, and yet it's really the exact opposite. We've become a on the Freedom Index, I think we're number 17 now. Countries that we consider to be backward countries are ahead of us now, and. Right. Do any of these legislators see that? I mean, they're there. They see this stuff all the time. It's amazing that they let all the stuff pass by. But what is their reaction to all? I guess what do we expect them to do, and what do we expect will be the short term and then the long term effect of this, of your program?
You know, the short-term effect, like I said, we're hoping to pass a federal bill. The long-term effect, and then initiate similar bills within the states. The long-term effect is we need to change the hearts and minds of the American public and our legislators as to how we're looking at crime and people who have committed crime. We need to start talking about some of the underlying systemic issues, addiction services, mental health services, treating people with mental illness in a different way, giving them resources so that they're not ending up having to commit a crime and ending up in prisons where their disorders go untreated. You know, it's interesting that you say, what did the legislators say? I think the message does get across, but you have to say it in very many different voices. We recently brought Alicia Keys, who's the spokeswoman for our Justice Reform Now campaign that is calling on Congress and the president to bring substantive criminal justice reform this session. We brought her to Congress and we had her speak. And it was like they'd never heard some of the points she was making before. And, you know, she's a woman. She comes to this from the same perspective I do, as a mother who's concerned about the children who are growing up without their parents, or the children who might grow up with a high likelihood of being incarcerated. But hearing her speak and the other 94 plus celebrities that we have signed up with our justicereformnow.org campaign, we started seeing a lot more people paying attention and listening. So hopefully we can get as many voices as we can to join us in calling on Congress for reform.
Are you aligned at all with the drug legalization organizations? Because that seems to be a large compose a large number of people that are incarcerated right now. And again, unless you're committing a crime, ingesting a drug that someone says is you shouldn't be ingested is none of their damn business. You know, I should be free to take whatever I want, provided I do not interfere with anyone else's life. But that's my perspective, but a perspective of most people. That's the way the United States was 100 years ago. Even Coca-Cola had cocaine in it, you know, so Coke, really, that's how the name Coke came from. But are you aligned with those organizations? Are you on the same page? Or are you connected with these people at all?
Yeah, you would not believe the coalitions that have been built. We work with the Drug Policy Alliance. They helped co-sponsor our summit, which, by the way, was also co-sponsored by the ACLU and Coke Industries. Not Coca-Cola, Coke Industries.
Oh, you're kidding me. Oh, that's KOCA. Okay.
Yeah, we had ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, as a co-sponsor, the Federalist Society, both, which are typically conservative organizations. And then we also had, the National Criminal Defense Attorneys League, and like I said, the ACLU and other typically progressive organizations all coming together. So we're all fighting for the same cause. We want to see folks of various crimes let out of prison, and we want to see some real sentencing reform, both for violent and nonviolent crimes.
Yeah, well, that's great. Maybe if there are enough coalitions, that will bring enough people to the fore, and as a result, enough pressure on our elected officials to finally do something. I'd like to see the United States reverse its course in so many areas, with the wars, the military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the medical-industrial, all that. I like to revert back to our free society, and with that, if people want to take drugs, go, girl, go. I don't care what you do, provided you don't bother me, And now if someone commits a crime, then they should be punished for it, because you need a society that has some parameters. You can't have everyone doing whatever the heck they want to do if it affects other people. And I'm a free spirit, if you will.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Joe, and I hope that you'll consider going to our justicereformnow.org petition. We're collecting 1 million signatures to bring, and Alicia Keys is going to help us as our partner in this, deliver to the president and ask the Congress as well as the president to bring some substantive criminal justice reform.
I already have.
Awesome.
I already have done that. Yes.
I hope all your listeners will as well.
Okay. Jessica, we have only about 2 more minutes. I'd like to leave the last 2 minutes for you, and especially to tell our listeners, how they could get involved, how they can help, and anything else that you'd like to say.
So I would like to just say, this is a very important issue. It's one that has not been on a lot of people's radars. And it wasn't on my radar till I was personally affected by it. But at this point, we're all personally affected by it. Our schools are failing because they're underfunded. Our medical system is a joke because it's also a lack of resources and money. And yet our incarceration industry continues to grow exponentially. And like I said, cost taxpayers $80 billion a year. So this is all of our problem. And it's time for everybody to get involved, to go sign our petition, justicereformnow.org. Go ahead and share it and like it and tweet it and get it out there. And then also start paying attention to what's going on in your local government. I can't say enough how important it is to vote in elections for district attorneys, for sheriffs, for judges. These are the people who their decisions and their performance on their job pack our prisons or can lead to sensible alternatives to incarceration. Yep. So those would be my 2 action items.
Okay. One question I didn't intend to ask. I intended to ask this question before, but I never did. Many of the young men and women who now serve in our military, when they go overseas and they're subjected to this tremendous pressure, especially when they don't know really what they're fighting for, aren't many of them? Don't many of them resort to drugs? To tolerate the tension that they're under?
There's a huge substance abuse issue within returning veterans. And that's part of the reason that we've been pushing at Cut 50 for veterans courts, so that they can be properly connected to groups and organizations that will help them with those issues, as opposed to thrown into prisons after serving our country.
Okay, so if we could only stop the war on drugs altogether, close all the military bases, bring all the men and women home who are serving in our armed forces to protect America and not the overseas oligarchs and whatever, maybe this world would be a better place. Jessica, you've been a wonderful guest. I hope that you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, and keep in touch, okay? Thank you so much for being our guest. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Good luck. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, folks, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Until next time, stay well, stay tuned.